Okay, so what's B asking me to do? I'm writing a method called update downloads. It takes a list of song titles. For each title in the list, okay, it's updating download list, which is download info items. And it's checking the titles. Now, I just did this for a single object, right? That's what we did in A. Let's look at that. For A right here, for a title, right, I'm checking it against the download list. And if the item exists, it's going to return the object. And B, it's saying, hey, if you can find the object using the title, add one to the increment count. Okay? And if you don't find it, well, what happens if it's not already there? It returns null, right? And if it returns null using that method I just wrote, then add one to the increment count. Okay, so that seems pretty straightforward. I'll have it check for the object, the download info object. If it finds it, I'll just increment the count. And if it doesn't find it, I'll add it to my download list. Add it to my download list. Okay. Now, frequently in these, the part B or C will use an earlier method you wrote. So you should really keep your eyes open for whether a method you just wrote allows you to do part of these subsequent methods, and this one will. So I'm going to need to run through this array list called titles. So for, I like to call them each. And these are string elements. First string, each. I'll put a little T there so remember these ones are just the titles. In titles. Okay. Now, this method, so I'll call this method, it's going to return a download info item, right? So I'm not making a new one. I'm just assigning it to this new reference variable. Download info is the data type. I'll call it maybe new, so I remember I'm checking to see if it's in the list or not. And then I'll call that method get download info. And this one, the string elements are called each T. So run it through all the titles. Okay, so if it finds that one, there are two things that can happen. It'll either store null there or it'll store the object. If maybe new isn't in the list currently, it will assign it a value of null. If it assigns it a value of null, I need to add it to my download list. Download list, add, so I'll need to make a new one. And if I pop over to download info and look at what the constructor requires, right? When I say new, it means I'm using a class constructor, so you need to see what parameters it takes. It takes a title, and what am I calling my titles here? Each T. So I handed off that title, and the constructor will automatically assign it a count of 1. And I need one more parenthesis, I think. Okay. So if it doesn't return null, then it did find it. If it does find it, I just need to increment the count. Right there, I'm calling it when it finds it may be new. So maybe new. In this case, it's not new. And the method in the other class is increment times downloaded. Okay, I think that'll compile. Sometimes I forget parentheses. That guy should be, should be a semicolon. That was a statement. See if that'll compile. Okay. So what do we see here? we'd already figured out how to process titles using this previous one to get the instances. Here, I'm assigning the name may be new to the object. It'll either store a null there, or if it finds it, right, maybe new now is a reference to it that'll point to the object so I can increment it. And the increment and get title methods were both download info methods. So we're just using methods that already are written. This idea of using the get download info on the titles, because we just written something that would return the item or give us a null if it's not in the list. This frequently happens with parts B and C. So when you're reading these free responses, keep an eye open for, hey, I've got something I can reuse. If you rewrite the code, you'll be penalized for that, for not recognizing that you have code that will provide part of the solution if you just reuse it.